This is the first fall layout update video I'll do here. Not much has been going on, but some has been going on. And this is really just the season where things start to ramp up for me anyways. We're going to start here in Clifftop. You can see one of the things I made here is a better mock-up of the company store. It really changes the look up here. I really like it a lot. And I also did one of the company store, which you can see by this big spray bottle, just the size of how big this store really is going to be. It's going to be a little bit less here because the ground actually slopes up here. So it's not quite as big on this end, but it is a big structure, especially this back side where it's, full 4 stories tall. I've been going back and forth on whether to put this here or not. When I planned the layout, I planned to put it there. In real life, it would have been back over here on the other side of the stream. That track there would have curved around and it would have been over there. But, obviously there's a backdrop there. I'm limited by space, especially in O scale. Everything is really more difficult to put in unless you have a lot of space. But even if I did have a lot of space, it'd be so far back there, I don't know how I would ever get to it. It'd be like 6 feet that way. So I thought to include it, I would put it up here where it can be viewed. It's a really neat structure. Plus, I want to be able to take it out if I want to. One of the thoughts was to make this kind of contest worthy. It's got really large windows, so it's going to be really a nice structure to put all the interior in there. Even though the front's kind of up against the backdrop here, you'll still kind of be able to see it. And of course, when I take it out to bring it to shows, whether I'm just displaying it or if I enter it in a contest, we'll see. But at least you can see the front then. Kind of plan on doing the same thing with the car shop. I want to do a full interior lift-off roof. And it's one of the reasons why I built a better mock-up here is because that is going to be a long ways down the road. There's a lot to do between now and then. Back here, this kind of little structure here, that's the full length and width engine house that would have been up here in Clifftop. That too would have been on the other side of Mans Creek. That track would have, this track right here would have curved off. This track here would have curved and met up with it, and they would have went across the stream, and there had been another turnout that came back. So this would have went into the company store, and then there would have been a turnout that would have come back into that structure there. I hadn't planned on using it. I've been going back and forth whether or not to put that up here and then make that just a flat or like a forced perspective image on the backdrop, or maybe something on the other side of trees to suggest it. But I've always wanted to build that structure, so I think I'm going to go back to putting that there, even though it's in the wrong spot. And I've thought about this engine house here, that maybe if I change this track here to curve off this way, and I've kind of mocked up a hill here with this painter's canvas here, but there is a space back here behind the strip tipple that I could tail that track back and run it back and deadhead it back here somewhere out of sight. I can just put a hill and trees right here, and I could run a locomotive up behind the trees and then come back and go into that engine house so that it's the same direction that the prototype was. One of the goals for the layout was I didn't want to compress any structure. I wanted them to stand alone as a full-size structure, and I didn't want to flip any of them. And the reasons for that is that if I were to ever move and I did have the correct spot, I wouldn't have to rebuild any structures. And I also wanted to be able to build them as a standalone. Again, if I want to take them out and display them or even enter them in a contest. There isn't a lot of structures to build on here because there isn't a lot of space. So I'd rather have structures that I can spend, maybe a year working on them once the layout's up and running, and just enjoy that process of scratch building and fully detailing the interior, and then maybe entering them in a contest. I don't do much contest stuff anymore, but maybe I'll want to get back into it. So that might be a change I might make right here. And if you've been following on Facebook, I've talked about a change here. You can see this cardboard I've laid out here. You've probably heard me say it a million times. I just really do not like this curved turnout here. I don't like the look of it. I don't like curved turnouts to begin with, and I've already got too many of them on here. The other reason why is I would like to have the train go along the edge of the strip tipple like it really did. Now I have to curve it. Normally it would have been come out kind of back here and swung out around it here and kept going. I obviously can't do that before I run into a wall, but I can get it really close. If I change this and run this line closer to the backdrop, almost touching it, and then come back out to where it was, I can get it, 2/3 of the way along the edge of this thing here. So the other thing is that the turnout that's normally in here that's curved, which curved turnouts are really long in order to maintain that inner radius as your minimum. Curved turnouts take up a ton of space, where a standard number 6 is actually a really short turnout. And I can have the number 6 be right here in this area to form this siding here. And then the lead into it will be nice and straight. So when a locomotive backs out, it's sitting on a straight. It's not kind of curved back in here like it used to be. And I think I'll like the look of that a lot better. Pardon the shape of the tipple. I haven't put it back together from me tearing all the cameras out of it, but I'll get that back together here. So I might swing this track up and around, and if I do that, I'm just going to saw off the spline here and blend all that in. And I think rather than rebuilding it out of spline, I might, since I've already got this pattern cut out of cardboard, I might cut that out of plywood and put the homoset on top. And the reason for that is that I'm going to have to slightly change the way it goes to that backdrop. And that's been harder to do. I might not be able to get that flex track out of there. It's fairly glued down, and I don't have a lot of flex track left that's in good shape. A lot of the stuff you see laying around here is really broken up. That's why I use it for just estimating. So I might build this out of plywood so that I can have this out of here, lay the track, and then fish the whole thing back to the corner. It might be easier for me to get a nice smooth transition in the hidden trackage, which is where you really want to have your best track. Is I don't want any trouble back in there. And it might be better than just to build this whole piece out here and then lift it up and put it in there. We'll see. I don't know. That's what I'm kind of working on here over the next couple of weeks. This will pretty much stay the same here. I had thought about maybe running this as a different line down here, but I really like the sparseness of this. I'll have to do a little more scenery fill in here. Originally I was going to have this to be Mans Creek on this side. I know it's on the wrong side, but what that does is one of the problems with the O scale is it's really hard, especially when the layout's high, to have any scenery between you and the trains, because it can become, especially a structure even, it become a major view block because it's so tall. So what I like to do on my foreground scenery is, if it doesn't slope away, I like to put scenery into that suggests something, lower, or justifies having something lower and flatter, which would be either like a dirt road, or in this case, I'm going to use a stream here that's going to kind of come back. There'll be a little bit of land here. I can have some trees right here because there's nothing in there. So I can have some stuff in here to block the view, and it'll help block the view between this transition, your line of sight to where that hits the flat backdrop. There was a little leaning shed. I don't know what its purpose was. That was sitting along the tracks here. It would have been on this side of the main line, but I'm going to use it in this triangle here to also hide that kind of where the tracks run right into the backdrop. So that'll kind of break that up a bit. But the stream will run, kind of come on the layout right as this curves away here, which is another reason why I'll kind of have to use some visual trickery here, because on this side is technically a dirt road that comes down here, and that'll run off the layout, and then the stream will kind of run on. So those who know will be like, what? But those who don't know won't think nothing of it. So the stream will come down here. It'll be a full width stream that pulls away from the edge, a little bit of land on this side. Then it's going to come by the edge here again, and it's going to run half off the edge. That way, when the scenery comes down into the stream will be flat, and it keeps everything low right here, no trees. And that stream will continue to run along this edge here as we get to this mine site here. And it'll just always keep this front edge low. Now I can put something big here because there's nothing here but just hopper cars spotted here. The mine will be, and structures will be right back in here. And that'll help frame this in. One of the other reasons why I wanted to have the big store here is that it helps kind of block all this off and make like these kind of visual walls. They're not real walls, but they'll help kind of frame this whole area. And I really like the feeling of this building being here, and how when you walk in to this little room here, it sort of opens up into this scene, and you don't really see across through the openings here. And it'll be the same this way if I build this scenery up. There will be fascia that comes down in here too to, it'll tie in like up in here. It won't be all the way to the edge back there, and it'll kind of bring the scenery down in here a little bit. So that's what's really going to go on here in Clifftop. I do have a goal of getting at least some of the stuff settled in here so I can get the base scenery in. It's really easy to cut it here when there's no fascia on here. And then I really want to get all the fascias in this year so I can get the curtains in down here. And I think that'll really finish this off. Again, I'm going to alter that panel so that'll be smaller and tighter up there. There's been really no work done in the Landisburg area other than just me putting in ties. That's kind of a goal this year, is to get all the rails laid in here so that this becomes fully operational. The main goal this year is going to be that all tracks will be in and all trains will be running, so I can start formulating operating sessions. So there's a lot to do in here. I got to build some temporary bridges here. I may raise this up, and I may raise this town up 1 inch, but we'll see how that goes. I had to do some little bit of surgery here on the lift bridge, because when I put this piece of fascia in, I forgot there was supposed to be a board behind it here, and I had finished all this joint down here and screwed it in and glued it in. And I thought it looked a little thin right here, but I thought maybe I knew I had a plan for that. I couldn't remember exactly. And then when I came out here, one day I was going to cut this piece of fascia in here to get the lighting valance in up here. And I realized then when it transitioned from here, this sticks out. So I had that the fascia was actually bending right here, and I forgot all about it. So I had to dig out all the screws here and pull this out and put this 3/8 of an inch board back here through this whole area here, which you can see pulled that out 3/8 of an inch. And because of that, the hole was actually a little higher here. So what I did is I just took my router and I routed out that area right there, and then cleaned up the corners with a chisel. And then I'll have to fill all this with joint compound and then smooth and repaint all this. But the bridge is actually working pretty good. I'll have to get my latch up here. I've been thinking, I have a half a mind to automate this. There's going to be a hill right on this side here that I could hide some kind of mechanism where I could just push a button and that bridge flips up. But I would want it to go fast, and so I'm kind of thinking about how all that might look. And I'm not going to rush this because it works now, and it might be a project, a year or two down the road. We'll see what happens. But it'd be pretty neat to be able to just push a button, the bridge flips up, and then there'd be like another button on the other side for an operator here to push, and then the bridge would flip up. I think it'd be a neat addition. Keep your hands free. We talked about this already, about the bridges. I haven't really changed anything in here. Came across a bunch of styrofoam I've been collecting in here, so it's kind of a mess. So here we are at the dump trestle site, and part of the goal, the number one goal of getting all the tracks in, would be also getting this dump trestle in. And the goal actually this week is to get the trestle in and get it functioning to some capacity. And if you've been following me on Facebook, you see I've been working on this thing for weeks. It's been a lot of cutting and fitting wood and printing out these 3D printed foundations. And I've been stacking up foam in here so they don't have to make the foundations as tall as I originally planned. But it's going somewhat well. I've been struggling with the contacts, and we'll get to that in just a second. I'll show you where I'm at. But I think I'm on the downward side of the hill, and things will go together here pretty quickly this week. And with any luck, the goal was by Thanksgiving, we're going to dump a coal car, and so we'll see if that goes well. You can see this is one of the middle sections here. Well, I'll show you the other sections if you haven't been on Facebook. We'll take a look at those real quick. One change I'm going to do to this trestle is, if you looked at my old video from my previous layout, I used a kind of a pull lever to initiate the air blowdown. The air is used to blow any residual coal out of the hopper cars, not because I mind that it's in there, but what it does is it helps make sure there isn't any coal stuck in the doors, so that the doors shut all the way. Because what'll happen is if the doors don't shut all the way and you go to load coal, as you're coming back, you'll be dropping coal in the tracks, which it'll make a cleanup mess eventually. But what could happen is a piece of coal could land in a flangeway, a guardrail, or something. And so the more I can make sure that those cars are clean, the less problems we'll have, especially in here in the dual gauge. When they come out here, there'll be a lot of places for coal to get stuck. But what I thought I'd do is do something a little differently. Is I bought these air solenoid valves, and what these will do is, these are just 12 volt actuated on off. This is a normally closed air valve, so I'll use a momentary button which will open these up. And the reason for that is I decided I wanted to have the control panels, 2 control panels, one for each of the coal and one for the coke dumping area. And I wanted to have all buttons this time so that the feel was the same. So you'll have a button for opening the doors, a button to close the doors, and a button to blow the cars down. Rather than the old version, I had these really hard to push big metal buttons for the doors, and then I had this lever to pull for the blowdown, which was kind of fun, but I didn't like the tactile feel of it all. There was just something really, kind of clunky about the whole thing. And so now they'll have nice momentary buttons that'll all be the same. You'll just be able to push them, push them, push them, and that'll kind of make that process, I think, feel a lot better. I had a half a mind to use like an Arduino and program all these things to work, but the trouble with the doors is those motors aren't the highest quality motors, and they vary a little bit in how long it takes for one door to open. So one car the motor might be really fast. They seem to operate at about 2 volts is what they really do, go at the speed I like. But at that low speed, the motors are kind of poor and the drive's poor, that some go slower than others. And so if I try to do an Arduino program, what I'm afraid might happen is either a door won't fully open, if I, like, say, time it to be, opening doors for 2 seconds, or they might not fully close because they might be more efficient opening than they are closing. And I figured, operators can visually do that. It'll be, one of the jobs. So we're just going to go back to full manual. The difference will just be that there'll be now just a push button for the air valve. So the last thing that I'm doing here is just before the season ended last year, as I started mocking in the road bed. This is the piece of road bed that'll go on top of the framework for the staging yard. It kind of has to do a weird thing. We're in the furnace room here, and this is the plumbing for the house and the sprinkler system, and I have to go around that. I had thought about getting really carried away and tearing this all out and making like some kind of neat little station here and putting a finished wall back here, but I decided just to go with this here. We just I'm pulled away from the wall to go around all the pipes, and then I move back against the wall to go behind the water heater. Now this is an electric water heater, so there is no flames in here. And then we're gonna run it back here. What'll basically be up here is the only thing that's gonna really be here is just a runaround. So as a train comes in here, it simulates maybe going to the woods, and at some point in the session, I'll come back in here and I'll have a stool up in here and I'll just run the locomotive around the other side and then put logs in all the loads there and then let it come out some other time. This wire that's hanging down here is going to be, I'm just kind of throwing this in here. This is a temporary wire here. What it does is there's an outlet that's switched on the other side of the wall that I have the entire layout hooked up to. So when I come in and I turn the switch on, it actually sends power to an outlet that I have plugged in the main power source for the layout that turns on the lights, turns on the DCC system, it turns on any of the outlets I have wired into the layout where I might want to hook up a soldering iron. So when I leave the room, if the lights are off, every single thing is off. I can't accidentally leave anything on. So what I want to do though is I want to take and run a dimmer switch for the track lights that are in the gorge area over to where the dimmers are for the LED lights. So this will go to the dimmer switch, which will then go, so this is going up to the track lighting that I put in there. It kind of goes through I have the ceiling piece down here. It goes over into the ceiling outlet. And that's a temporary junction box. I'll replace that when this is all wired in. But what I'll be able to do is when I throw that switch, this wire will actually go over to the dimmer switch, which will come back and hook into this, and then that'll dim the lights up and down. So we're going to get this in and get all that wired up this here too as well, so all the lighting's done. This summer I actually built this shelf in here for the 3D printers too. There's my original 3D printer. It's actually sitting in my spray booth there. And then what I've got here is this is the bigger 3D printer, which sits under the air exchanger. Now this 3D printer, the lid actually needs to lift off. And I was going to cut that lid and put hinges on it, but what I ended up doing is I just took drawer slides and I put the printer on these so I can pull it out and lift it over the top of that, and then I can just shove it back in there for printing. But that's another little project I did. I kind of made a space in here to put things like gloves and cleaners and new boxes of resin. So kind of working on that. I'm trying to get some organization going here. That's one of the things that happens when you're building a layout, is you can tend to be so excited to get the layout going that you just make a mess out of everything, and then eventually that kind of catches up to you and it makes it hard to work. So, kind of getting rid of some of these old cabinets and getting this junk cleaned up in here, getting this all organized. So this is the first section of the dump trestle here, and we're looking at the back side. Actually, you'd probably call it the front side, but for me it's the back side. This would be the side that's on the backdrop. Operator would be on the other side here. And this has been a real bear to build this thing. It's kind of it's big for one thing, I mean, it's again, it's O scale, so this section's probably, I don't know, what is that, almost 3 feet long. The whole structure when it's together is about 5 feet long, so it's kind of awkward to work on. I'm glad I didn't glue it all together, so I'll have to glue the middle section to here when it's on the layout, and then finish the bracing that ties this together, and then spike across it. It is dual gauge, and one of the things, if you look at the prototype, not only is it dual gauge, so there's the third rail, there's the narrow gauge and the narrow gauge rail, but it's got guardrails in there that we have to get in there. So there's 5 rails in this section here, and it's a lot of spikes. When I do bridges, I use micro spikes. So I use the micro-engineering micro spikes, and I pre-drill the holes. I don't push any of these in here, so there's a lot of holes to drill. And I also like to do every single tie. So there's 5 rails of every single tie for 5 feet is a lot of spiking. Now, to get it going, to speed things up, I'm going to spike every 5th tie, and then on the layout over there, I'll be able to fill in all the gaps before I put any of the railings on and build the structure house. So when I say I'm going to get this running or dumping here, it means that I'm going to do the minimal amount of work to get trains to be able to come out on here and dump, and then I'll finish up the rest after that, which is, I do have the roof built for this, but I don't have the tar paper on. It's not weathered. I'm going to have to put a cover in here. If you watched my latest Facebook post, you noticed that I did a slow motion video of this, and I do those to kind of see what's happening, because everything happens so fast, and plus I'm trying to hold batteries on the wires here because I don't have the switch going on, and I can't watch it 100%. So doing the slow motion video from my phone really helps me watch how everything's reacting. And I thought maybe the coal would just slide out of here. I put this plate in here to keep coal that was bouncing around in the bin, kind of settle it down. I thought it would just come sliding right down this chute here and go out that hole right there. But it doesn't. It kind of tumbles, and it pops up, and it jumps over the edges of these, and it'll end up going down and filling in these gaps down here. So I'm going to have to put a cover. And so what I think I'm going to do is just going to pop this one brace out here. This one's not on, or wait, which one? Here. Yeah, I guess I'm going to pop both of these out, and I'm going to make a cover in here. So I'll put some strip wood down the side, and I'll just use some magnets to hold a piece of this black cardboard down on top of that to kind of keep the coal controlled in there. But this is really hard to build because it comes down at an angle, and it also is angled to the backdrop. So it's not a nice straight cut here. So this is really hard. I had to make a lot of templates and a lot of filling and changing and building right on site to make sure this would all match up tight to the backdrop. I kind of fudged a little bit of the bracing in here so that I end up with one that's on the edge here. And this is about where the tipple house would start right here, that go over the coal, the standard gauge coal hoppers. So I just kind of elongated this a little bit so that didn't look like a weird corner of a building coming out right here or anything. The sad part about it is that you almost can't see any of it when it's on the layout. You only kind of get glimpses of it. So the good part about that is I didn't have to be super careful about building it. The bad side is all the work you see here, and 90% of it isn't even noticed. But I had to do it, we're gonna get it in there. I've got the braces in here. I didn't do very good bracing underneath here. Again, you can't see any of it, so I actually just used cardboard to stiffen all this stuff up under there, and it's all black, and then I airbrushed it black to hide any glue spots or anything. The biggest struggle I had with this tipple versus the original tipple, I had an open top on it, and I had the spring wires were really long. They were pivoting back here, and these wires were allowed to move up, and they're really nicely sprung. But with this one, I had more information, and the information kind of pointed to the fact that this wasn't opened up in here. I always wondered how they would safely have that all opened up in there, but it seems as if they actually had these ties go all the way across. Now, I widened my gaps. I don't know if they were this wide, but I widened it just because, again, I had a video earlier where I had this to be more like the spacing down here, and it just made a mess. So by opening up the gaps a little bit more, the coal does flow pretty nicely down through those ties. Now, in the prototype, there's in the shadows of the shed that covers this, there looks to be boards leaning up against the walls at an angle that I think help direct the coal down in here. So I will be putting those boards in, but they'll be part of the shed. So temporarily, I'm going to have to just clip on some cardboard strips along this edge and this edge if we're going to be dumping here in the next couple days. Back to the challenge of the wires. So with this top being solid, the wires were not, the contact wires didn't have the ability to go up and down as well as the other ones, because when I originally built them, I had them attached to the top here and they hit the ties. So what it did is it made the contacts really stiff, and when the cars would come over it, they kind of would do a bump as they went over the top, and I didn't want to have those bumps. The contacts need to be really soft. So I came up with a bunch of different ideas. One were these blades. I had these phosphor bronze blades in there, and I had cuts in these ties. So I had the deck all spiked down, all the ties in. I'd take all the rails off, pull all the spikes out, take ties out in this section, made the blades, spike it all back down, tested it. That's what you see in my Facebook page. It actually works really well, but I didn't like the look of the blades because I didn't like the solid pieces. Let me grab them real quick. So here's what these contact blades looked like. Now, they were painted black, so they didn't stand up, but they sat into a gap cut in the ties back here. And so they just sat above the ties. And they worked really well, but they just were too distracting visually. I really wanted to go back to wires, because even though the wires distract me, you can see right here, they kind of blend in pretty well. They're harder to see if you're not looking for them. But the challenge is that they had to go around the ties. Let's see if I can get this to focus. So what they do is they actually go under the ties, and I have a screw that I cut the top off because I don't want to have a glue connection for something like this. So I have a screw up to the tie to a brass plate with a piece of phosphor bronze wire going out, and it bends up and it comes around the top of the ties and it goes back down, and it actually hooks. There's a little hook on the bottom. And the reason for the hook is to allow the wire to, because this is a really short, let's see, I'm gonna look through here. This is a short connection between these two, which if I were to fasten that there, that would make that very stiff. So the flex goes all the way from this end to that end, but this end can still flex down because of that little loose connection here. This end will go down as much as it needs to. So they're really soft, but the hook keeps the two together so that, I actually don't have this one hooked here. Let me hook it back up. I was painting it, so I unhooked it there. So the hook allows it to go down and then come back up and catch itself again. And so there's two of those on there. So you can see here, if I can go on this side, maybe you can see that hook better in there. Really hard to see it in there, but this allows this end to dip down in there. See, I don't know if you can see it in there. And then the hook just keeps it all together so that it can't snag and pull this up on this end. See, it's really strong. So the hook just provides a flexible joint in there. And then for cleaning these, what I can do is I just stick a piece of wood underneath there, and then I can clean the tops of those off. But I'm pretty satisfied with those. On the previous tipple, I had 2 contacts so that there was a guarantee that it would make contact. But I went with 1 this time, and I spaced it purposely on this side because the gearbox of the Shays runs down this side, and it'll miss that. Plus, I am going to probably go back to KD couplers, like 98% sure. And I am going to keep the trip in because I think there's going to be areas where I'm going to need to have a magnet back in the, buried underneath the dirt, but they'll be up in the Landisburg area. So if I'm going to have the trip wire on some cars, I'm going to have it on all cars. It's not just going to be, the cars that go to Landisburg. So that tripwire will run through here, and having this offset keeps it clear of that wire so there's no things catching in there. So I think we're on this section. I think I'm good. I'm gonna run these wires now. I cut these out. I'm gonna run the wires back down through. I'm gonna get this all hooked up, finish putting all the spikes in here, and this section can go in. So here's a dump trestle bin. On this one, I spaced the ties farther apart because on top of this one, the shed is not opened up on the side. You can't see in it as well. And I figured I would space the ties farther apart because it'll just make it work that much better. You can see the connections in there are not finished totally. And I'll tell you why in 2 seconds here. But so those are the same type of connections. They actually only go around one tie. But what I started doing here is I started building this section, and I was holding it actually this way, thinking that, so here's how I was working on these at the workbench, thinking I had it right. So I started mounting the contacts on the coke bin on the same side as the coal. Trouble is this actually goes this way. And so luckily I hadn't finished spiking all the rails down on this section. So the contacts will have to be moved to the bottom side here because the gearbox of the Shay, again, would run in that section. And what would happen with that is they would flex down out of the way, but it would wear on the bottom of the gearboxes. And so by me moving the contacts so they don't touch the gearbox, I don't have to worry about any wear problems on the gearbox. The last thing we'll look at here are all the piers for the dump trestle. These are 3D printed. They simulate the concrete. They are in primer. I use a sandable primer. It's like an automotive primer. You can get it at pretty much any auto parts store. It's important to use a sandable primer, not just any primer, because this primer is made to be sanded. It doesn't clog up the sandpaper. So this is, I sand this with 320 grit sandpaper. And I'm gonna get these all glued down. Every single one of them is different. So they're all either numbered with a marker or I printed the number of their order in the bottom. I had gray primer on these, which would have been pretty nice as a base for the concrete, but I ran out. So the last coat was black primer, but it doesn't matter because they'll all get painted in the scenery. I know they're odd shape, but most of these you don't see. And I'll show you what I mean when I get these all glued in. So I have to get these glued in today to get the trestle mounted, to get the rails finished, to get the wiring done, and to be able to allow us to go out and dump coal in 2 days. So if you've been following my Facebook page, you know I've been really busy this summer with these 3 Shays. You saw this one here. This is Shay number 2 that I did get finished up at the end of the last winter. And I made a mention on the video that I was going to work on Shay 5. So I did get Shay 5 finished up. So that's what Shay 5 looks like. And when I finished Shay 5, I decided to rebuild the drive on Shay 8. So there's Shay 8 right there. And when I mean rebuild the drive, the only thing I saved was the boiler, the cab, and the tender. The cylinders, the frame, the trucks, the firebox, pilots, everything had to go. And I rebuilt it to run just like these 2 up here. The reason why I had to rebuild Shay 8 is the drive didn't work going down grade. And what I mean by that is a lot of Shays have a problem going down grade because of how loose the drive line is. What'll happen is they buck really bad. And a long time ago, Cliff Grant solved that problem by using fall hopper, coreless motors mounted in the tenders. And they do have a direct gear drive to one wheel set. And that just takes out all the play from all the different universals and gears. And the Shays run really smooth down grade. I thought I could be clever enough to design a really tight drive system in this one and put the motor in the boiler. It just didn't work. It was better. It was okay. It just wasn't good enough. It did not perform like the Grant Line drive. So I took the Grant Line idea, and I'm actually using old Grant Line gears, but I redesigned the truck to make the drive stronger. And so my gears are mounted in a gear case, and they don't use the cross box, and they have a different shaft in them, so the shaft is more stable in them. And you know, this is the star of the show. I couldn't have these 2 running great and this one running poor, so it just meant I had to go through the hassle of rebuilding that whole thing, and it took me all summer to do these. So thanks for watching these videos. As you saw this summer, I took some time to go visit some other layouts. And that was a really good time. I went to operate some other narrow gauge layouts in the area here. Plus I went on the Front Range Rail Tour, got to operate some of the layouts I've always wanted to see and run. And so that was a really good time. Thanks for those people that invited us all over there. This winter, I'm going to focus on this layout, and hopefully by the end of this winter, we'll actually see operating sessions on my layout. Thanks again for watching.